Hello again, YouTube, and welcome back to Emergency Podcast with me, Nigel Goodwin.
And me, Ian Bailey.
And you're back, Ian. You're back. I was a traitor last week, and I ran off and did my own thing without you. I'm very sorry.
No. I was hugely impressed at your ability to speak for 15 minutes coherently. It's really hard. Look, I used to do radio news, right? And that was only 3 minutes, but it's terrifying when the little red light comes on and it's all you. Right, it is terrifying. So well done.
Well, I mean, all I will say, Ian, is you've known me for like 30 years. I like to talk, but no, we're all good. We're all good. But what have we been up to? I mean, look, it's emergency podcast. There have definitely been some emergencies, and I was jotting down some notes before we started around the emergencies we've had this week. There's definitely been emergencies for Keir Starmer. We'll get into that a little bit later, I'm sure. Bit of an emergency for reform, I think, at the moment as well. Maybe
Yes.
maybe that is worth talking about. And but I thought we could start a bit further away with a big steaming pile of rubble that is 1/3 of the White House in America. Donald Trump has genuinely done something that no US president has ever done. It is true. He has obliterated the East Wing of the White House. I mean, what can you say?
And it is astonishing. You see the pictures of it, and initially you've got the machines starting to rip the facade of the building away, and you think, oh, okay, fine, they've got to plumb this thing in. But then they just carry on, and now you've got the aerial view, and it's gone. And you've got the MAGA right saying, oh, look, it's just another refurbishment. All the presidents have done refurbishment. No, refurbishment is, well, okay, we're going to change the wallpaper. We're going to improve things like here and there. He's just bulldozed it.
It is, and look, it is astonishing, genuinely astonishing. And I think, and look, I will caveat it with absolutely, presidents are allowed to renovate and make changes to the White House, but there is due process. And look, Kennedy did it back in the 60s. There are things that are done, but you're doing it within the confines of a historical landmark, one of the most photographed buildings in the world.
Well, you just said about process. He hasn't actually gone through the process. He's not been given permission to do this. And you can say, well, he's the president. No, he still has to follow the process, as you said, and he hasn't bothered.
But this is an interesting thing, actually, about the process thing. It brings back to me a whole load of things that Trump has done, both in his previous term and this one, where obviously we know he loves to rule by executive order and try and see what he can get away with. Only a couple of months, 2 or 3 months ago, he bulldozed the Rose Garden, Kennedy's Rose Garden, and replaced it with a cheap patio for entertaining, which now on satellite photos you're like, well, that's really added to the glamour of the place. But it felt like a tester, right? I'm going to do this and see what happens. Nothing happened, so now we can go and rip down half the building. And it reminds me a lot of this idea that these really old democracies, we're guilty of this as well. There's a lot of things that they're not kind of written down as law, right? It's more of a, well, you can do this, but you really shouldn't, right? Like firing an FBI director or a CIA director. Technically, there's nothing illegal for Donald Trump to do that. It's just not the done thing. You don't do it. Presidents really do, unless they really, really have to. They generally don't do that stuff. And it's the same here. There is a due process he has to go through, but there's a government shutdown, which he's already using as an excuse of like, well, what due process? There's a government shutdown. I can't go through committees and stuff to get this done. So I'll just sign an executive order and knock it down. I mean, look, it's cultural vandalism, right? I mean, it's a build. That part of the building stood for 120 years.
Well,
it's a historic landmark.
You mentioned the government shutdown. It's in Trump's interest for it to continue. Why does he want the government to reopen? Right? He wants to be able to. This gives him carte blanche to do anything he likes, and he's shutting down all of the Democrat programs, and he's openly saying, "I am shutting these down because they're Democrat," and he's going after troops now into various cities and saying you can't stop me. So I think he's threatening. Is it the governor of Illinois? They're trying to do him for seditious treason or something, right? Because he's disagreeing with them.
Yeah.
So absolutely bulldoze the White House, build your giant triumphal arch thing. What's going to be next? I assume a giant gold statue of himself, but with the hair nice this time, as opposed to that photo that he was most upset about. All of those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Look, and I heard that this ballroom that they're building, this gaudy gold encrusted ballroom, is going to have his name on it as well, which I mean just adds to the glamour
Yeah,
of the whole thing. I don't know if you've seen the renders of it. I'll edit some photos in and stuff later, but
horrendous.
it just looks like something from the Winter Palace in Russia. It doesn't.
No, it's like Germania. Hitler's plan for Berlin with the enormous mega buildings, right?
Yeah,
Because the ballroom completely dwarfs the
it is
actual
massive.
White House.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it just reminded me of that.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's in the grand scheme of things that he has done, and look, he has done some incredibly harmful and hurtful things to, people in America. But what's weird about this is that symbolism matters, right? And
Yeah.
if there's a symbol or an image that can define a legacy, it's that. It is
Oh,
a
sure.
steaming pile of rubble on what was one of the most photographed buildings on the planet, most recognizable buildings on the planet. It's incredible.
It
And
is.
I don't see how it doesn't end up defining him long after he is.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's the news from across the pond. But obviously, while I was away, I missed the slightly closer news from South Wales with the Caerphilly by-election, which obviously I know you covered in your excellent monologue in the last show. I mean, my thoughts on it, like just out of interest on this one, is first of all, you've got to give kudos to the Plaid Cymru candidate who won, because he has stood in that constituency in every single election since 1983 and never won until now.
Yeah.
So every single general election since 1983, he's been the Plaid candidate. Every single Senate election since 1999 or whatever it was, he's been the candidate, and he's never won. So to have that kind of resilience and to keep going, it's, as we've been saying, the impossible is now possible in our politics, and running for election and never getting elected until now, it's another one of these mission impossible things being pulled off. So you've got to really nod your head and go, yeah, that's fun. But my hot take, and I'll then ask you what you think about this. My hot take is that basically we have gone past peak Farage. Right, Reform not winning this by-election shows that he's already on the decline, and there's a whole number of things that back it up.
Yeah, it's a really good take, and it's something I touched on it the other day with the idea of Caerphilly in the context of it. What does it mean for Labour? What does it mean for Reform? And I think I said, it's like, look, there's only one winner, and that was Plaid Cymru, and that was the candidate of Plaid Cymru. It doesn't matter how you spin it. This is bad news. It's obviously terrible news for Labour, and we'll come on to that.
We'll come back to that in a minute.
We absolutely will. But for Reform, it ties into a whole load of other pieces as well, because look, it doesn't matter how many times, and we've certainly had some comments on some of the videos over this last few days. It's like, it's Labour heartlands, as you said, in Wales. It's like Reform have never won in that part of the world. They're never, it was always going to be hard and blah, 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 blah. It's like, you're spinning here. They thought they were going to win. They genuinely did, and they threw everything at it. They really did, and they didn't win it. But the context of everything, when you put it in the context of everything else, the polls they're certainly not surging anymore. And the last few polls that have come out are showing them maybe dipping in popularity a little bit. There's bad press about them now, which there hasn't been before. Bad press about Kent County Council and Durham County Council. And bad press about Farage. The story that won't go away. The Russia situation. This is a man who has appeared on Russia Today 13, 14 times in the past to blame Ukraine for being invaded. That, I don't know, I'll call it what it is. That's anti-British, because Ukraine is our ally and Russia is.
But we know Farage. We know Farage is anti-British. He flew across the Atlantic when he was supposed to be sat in Parliament. He flew across the Atlantic to go in front of a congressional committee demanding sanctions on Britain. When you're demanding sanctions on your own country, you're not being a patriot. You're being the people who are going attacking it. The reaction to Reform not winning this has been, well, I don't want to say astonishing, but I have sat slightly agog looking at them on social media, because the absolute outrage and furore being generated by Reform supporters on platforms like X. They have no clue what's gone on. And now, of course, they're blaming the voters. Who on earth are these voters who are not going out there voting for us? And then haven't we had something in the comments where They're attacking Plaid as what was it, communist or something?
Yeah, communist Plaid Cymru. And look, I mean, they are a left-wing party. Absolutely, they are a left-wing party.
Left-wing
But there's a
populism.
big difference between left-wing populism and communism, right? There's a sliding scale here. If it's left-wing, it doesn't make it communism. Just as if it's right-wing, it doesn't make it fascist. It's like it's a sliding scale.
I think there are a few markers, as you say. The polls are starting to. The polls aren't getting ever greater leads. That one poll that showed them winning, a majority of 704 seats or whatever it was, really does feel like an outlier, and they're starting to come back in a bit. But I think some of the criticisms and the probing that's going on is now there. But it's also that go back not very far, and it just seemed to have been normalised that people were racist. It was fairly normal that you can say almost anything you like that's screamingly racist, bigoted, jingoistic, xenophobic, whatever you want to call it, and it was okay. Now they're saying it. People are saying you can't say that. I mean, the MP for Runcorn and Helsby going out and whining on about there being too many black and brown people on the TV, and she's been absolutely roasted for it because it's completely outrageous for her to say that. But before, no one would have said anything, and now it's like, you can't say that. Or the people, again, on social media, like MPs are now standing up to your reform grifters who are saying things like, there are only Muslims on this street in Walthamstow, and the Stella Creasy, the MP, said, going, what seat, what street, where is it? And of course, there's no reply because it doesn't exist. So there is now pushback against this hard right racist grift, right? Which we've all been a bit afraid of calling Reform racist. I don't think Reform as a party are racist, but their agenda and a significant number of their supporters certainly are. And they've been dog whistling it for months, and it's been working for them, but suddenly it isn't. And why is that, Nigel?
Yeah, excuse me. I think, like you said, there's more scrutiny. And I think also it's taken time for people to organise and recognise that we're in this new world where anything goes. You just mentioned how a few months ago it would have been okay to say these racist things. Okay, from that perspective, or it would have been considered, it's just one of those things. But again, you go back a year, 2 years, 3 years, and it absolutely wasn't okay. So it's almost like we've come full circle. We've gone back. We're starting to go back to what we used to have. And I guess there's an element of maybe a lot of people in politics didn't realise just how far down the rabbit hole we had gone. And it takes time to mobilise and almost wake up and recognise that, hold on a minute, this was stuff that we didn't used to allow, that was definitely not cricket in this country. And we're going back to that now. We're going back to the kind of, hey, let's call this out for what it is. Let's scrutinise policies as well. We can do both. It's like, because calling out racism should always be done. Racism, misogyny, all of it.
Yeah.
Transphobia, call it out for what it is. Othering, as you often describe these things things as. But also scrutinising the policies and saying, hey, look, you want to govern Reform? You want to govern this country? Okay, what does that actually look like? And we now, I think you said this when we had the local elections back in May, we now have a chance to see how they do. This is what democracy is, okay? It's like they won some councils, congratulations to them, let's see how they do. And what we're seeing is infighting, and my favourite from the other day, them going and asking, I can't remember which council it was actually, I'll have to look it up, but it was, they went and asked for help from their political opponents on where they could make the cuts that they had promised they were going to make to save money, because they can't find the money anywhere. And so they're now asking the opponents that they absolutely, said they would never work with again. And this is just, I think all of this just adds up to it's a grind, right? It's a grind now for Nigel Farage and Reform, because they're suddenly realising it's like, this is harder than we realised.
Nigel Farage does not want to be Prime Minister. Nigel Farage doesn't want to be running anything. That's not what he's good at. He is a genuine world-class agitator, right? Politically, he's been doing it for decades, right? Finding the wedge issues to just keep hammering at until you sort of split people off and then get people following you. He's been too successful, because suddenly they're leading in the polls and he's going to be Prime Minister, and all of these crazy demands for King Charles should be giving us an early election because everyone wants Farage to be Prime Minister. Farage doesn't want to be Prime Minister. because then he has to govern, and governing means compromise, and governing is hard. And as you said, Reform went into the local elections, and they were basically saying all of this. Everybody knows that there is widespread corruption and waste in local government. Everybody knows that all of the money is being wasted on woke DEI nonsense, and that's all of the money that we're going to save. And they've got in there, and instead it's like, no, there aren't DEI officers. Money isn't being spent on woke, and I still don't entirely know what woke is other than the thing that I don't like. And what they are finding is, as you said, all of the cuts have already been made. Most of these councils have already been cut to the bone and beyond, and they're being asked to cut even further. And the only thing that's left, as now increasing numbers of these reform-run councils are doing, is to shove council tax up by a lot. So they came in saying, we will cut your council tax by cutting all of this DEI woke nonsense, and instead they're going to slam council tax up, because it's the slam of rhetoric into the wall of reality, right? You can have whatever slogan and call out that you want, and it all sounds great in opposition, but then you actually get in there and suddenly...
Yeah. And look, we've seen this with the, I hate to call them the establishment parties as well, right? Labour and the Tories, they'll throw mud at each other, then they'll get into power, and then they'll go, oh man, this is tricky. This is a lot trickier than, and look, and that's, while I've called them the establishment, Reform are an establishment party as well. They absolutely
well,
but given that most of their core figures are ex-Tories now, they're definitely, they might be pushing themselves as the plucky outsider, but when we think of plucky outsiders, I definitely think more now of the likes of Plaid Cymru and the Green Party.
It's actually been interesting as well, because as part of the going past peak Farage and it's starting to dip down the other side, I don't have time to sit and watch Question Time, and frankly, Question Time is a bit questionable, but I watch clips from it, and on last week's show, you had Mariella Frostra versus Nadine Dorries. Reform had put Dorries up as their spokesperson, and she's doing the usual Reform spiel about it's all these migrants' fault, and they're coming here illegally and they should go home. And Frostrup says, well, how am I supposed to get here legally? And she gave an example, and Dorries is like, no, there's legal routes. And she's like, no, there aren't. You got rid of them when you were in the Tory government. You got rid of them, so there aren't. Stop telling us there aren't routes. There aren't. And then she's like, okay, so I'm one of the 5,000 women who've just been raped in the Congo. Right? My sister's already in the UK. I need to get here. You made it so it's impossible to come legally, so what other option have I got? And you got the end, Dorries literally biting her lip because she knows, right? And I think it's now starting to be called out. And I've said it on here, and you've been pointing this out as well, right? Although Reform claim to be, this fresh new look on everything, Reform are the Tories. Every single one of the leading people in Reform, including Farage, at some point or other, have been Tories. And people like Tice and Yusuf were Tories until very, very recently. Right? So when you've got someone like Nadine Dorries, and there's loads of examples of these, but people who had a blue rosette, right, and sat there in government doing all of the things that they now say were terrible things, and now they've got a turquoise rosette, and they're saying, oh, we can go and fix all of these. No, you broke it. It's like saying, okay, I've been burgled, so I'm going to call the burglars up and ask them to go and to sort my locks out. It's just complete nonsense. And that, I think, is why Reform lost in Caerphilly, because people looked at it and thought, nah, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they, they are, this goes back to people are starting to wake up and see them for what they are, right? And it doesn't matter whether, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter about the racism and stuff like that, but it's more, it doesn't matter if you don't believe that they're racist, or you don't think that there's racist policies or whatever else, or whatever your opinions. But what does matter are the policies. What does matter is seeing all these faces that you recognize, where you're like, that's that one who really who was obsessed with Boris Johnson, that Nadine Dorries, wasn't it? That's that one.
Yes.
Wasn't she a Tory? That starts to feed into this whole, again, the grind that Reform now have. It's like they are now a part of this machine, and they don't just get to be crowned winners just because they're ahead in a few polls. It's like it's going to be much tougher than that for them to get there.
Absolutely. And look, I think Dorries is a perfect example of this, because she adored Boris Johnson. There's loads of clips of her sat on the front bench when Boris was Prime Minister, looking adoringly at him. I think that Boris was her work husband or something, right? It was that kind of
Yeah.
I know. It was that kind of
I know.
of relationship, right? And the simple truth is that she was absolutely in several of those, Tory governments in cabinet making all of these decisions, which she's now saying, well, hang on a second. And Reform is saying that Boris let this absolute tidal wave of people in. Well, she was sat around the cabinet table with him, looking adoringly at him. She can hardly say, I disagreed with it. Mate, you were there. You were doing this, right? And as you say, you start looking at, well, what is your policy and how's it going to work? And it's back down to the usual grift of, just send the foreigners home. Great. How? Right? Once people are in, you've then got to, let's say that you've got somebody in and they definitely shouldn't be here. And there's been a story this week about somebody who shouldn't be here escaping, and we'll touch on that in a second, right? But you've got to actually identify the people, you've got to detain them, you've got to have somewhere safe and secure to do it, you've got to have all of the people in place to process all of the paperwork, to get to the point where you say this person is here illegally and we don't want them and we're going to remove them. And then you've got to have an agreement to actually take them somewhere. All of this stuff about, you just send them back. Well, where and how? You can't just put somebody on a plane and land them into somebody else's country, because they're also sovereign and get to have a say in it. And when you start pushing for the detail of these things, just like with the Tories and the Rwanda scheme, which was the same grifting nonsense, right? It doesn't work in reality. Every time you poke anything at the reform stuff, it just falls apart. And the latest thing we've got now is Farage challenging Keir Starmer to a pint in a working men's club, if you've seen that, right? Come on, let's go and talk working lads, because I'm one of them, aren't I? Because I'm definitely Nigel Farage. I'm down working men's club all the time. Nonsense.
It's beyond populist. It's now just kind of performative. It's just performative,
A drinking contest could be a good way of settling this, though.
Or, who they should call for a drinking contest? William Hague. There's a blast from the past. The man who could drink 14 pints in a night, or so he claimed.
But just before we came on, you've had a story about this asylum seeker, because I haven't really been following this. So give us the details, because this sounds astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I read this headline, when this headline popped up on my feed, I genuinely thought I had, fallen into the thick of it. One of the greatest political TV shows of ever. And I was Malcolm Tucker screaming at the TV going, they did what? So what happened here is an asylum seeker, not just any asylum seeker, but an asylum seeker who was convicted of sexual assault, so he's a sex offender, an asylum seeker who was not only convicted of sexual assault, but was the catalyst for the entire summer of protests and flags going up everywhere, and that entire summer of madness, which was really driven by story that this man had attacked someone. He was staying at a hotel, as part of the asylum seeker program. They caught him, they tried him, he went to prison, and on the day when he was coming out of prison, he was supposed to be packed off into a van and taken away, and he was going to be going back to Ethiopia, which is where he's from. He was being deported to Ethiopia. But the prison guards let him go. They didn't. They literally just, and they didn't just let him go. They gave him advice on where to go on the train, and to go and get the train. This is how you go and get the train. This is what you need to do. Because this asylum seeker was confused. He didn't understand. He actually thought he was going back to Ethiopia, and he wanted to go back to Ethiopia. He wanted to go back. But somehow, and of course, this all comes back to the Labour government, right? They will get brought back to the Labour government, and this is why I mentioned the thick of it, because it's the most embarrassing story of ineptitude I can think of recently. And look, it's not. I mean, I'm going to say maybe it's unfair to say it's all the fault of the Labour government, but they are in charge, right? And immigration is the big ticket conversation right now, whether we agree that it should or it shouldn't be. But of all the asylum seekers to lose, you chose to lose the one who literally was the catalyst for all of the pain over the last 3 or 4 months in this country. They have now caught him. They caught him in London, and they will now, I hear, deport him to Ethiopia. But we shall see. Honestly, astonishing. that this kind
Well,
of stuff can happen.
I mean, it's astonishing, but at the same time, it isn't, because the human factor is always there, and people screw things up. But the all of the rhetoric and the tough talk from politicians of whatever party, right? They are not directly in control of these things, and they
No,
never have been. And despite all
no.
of this that they give to the voters and reassurance, you've always got almost certainly a contractor somewhere, yeah, who's not been properly briefed and not being paid well enough, and it's probably even more confusing than the asylum seeker was in terms of what was supposed to be going on. But I mean, you can only imagine what it must have been like being Keir Starmer, bless him, when one of the aides comes into him and says, "Prime Minister, we've had a bit of an issue with an asylum seeker."
Honestly, you would, and this is why I mentioned the thick of it, because if
Yep.
Keir Starmer did not go full Malcolm Tucker at that point and say every swear word under the sun while throwing things at the wall, the window, and anyone who was in his way, then I'd be very sad, because you just couldn't make it up. I mean, in terms of bad news stories for him, it's awful, and it's the same. We had the other one a few days before with the. So you mentioned terrible policies, and like the Rwanda policy and stuff like that. Of course, Keir Starmer's big policy on small boats was a one in, one out thing with the French government, where we'd take one and we'd send one asylum
Yep.
seeker back. And the very first asylum seeker we sent back came back on a small boat a few days later. And when he was asked why he came back, he said he didn't feel safe in France. And you're just like, so does he count as does he now count again? And now we send him back again, and it's another one in. It's just a great example of when things are going badly for you, and so things are going very badly for Keir Starmer right now. But when things are going badly, they don't just go badly; everything goes wrong. Like
Yep.
this is full on. I don't know whether we call it endgame stuff now for Keir Starmer. I
Well,
don't see. I mean, we've talked about how he doesn't, how hard it is for him to recover from things, and obviously we've been talking about Caerphilly. They've lost in the Labour heartlands in Wales, lost badly. Keir Starmer is now going to have to put up with Lucy Powell as his deputy, a person who he does not get on with and is definitely from the left side of the party and has already come out fighting. And meanwhile, he can't get a break, right?
first of all, congratulations to Lucy Powell. She has just been
Yes.
elected. She has just been elected as the Queen over the water, sat on paper, as the deputy leader of the Labour Party, but she's not in government. She's not liked by her boss. It's almost like they've gone from having a deputy leader. So who have we had as deputy leaders in the past? John Prescott, absolute towering figure of the Labour Party, given a big chunk of government to go out there and run, instrumental in keeping Blair and Brown working as well
Yeah.
as they did or didn't, or however you want to put it, or even Angela Rayner had drive and vision and a whole chunk of stuff to do. Lucy Powell doesn't have a job, doesn't actually get to do anything. I think her entire role now, having been elected as deputy leader, is basically to fight the insurrection against Keir Starmer. She is the Tom Watson to Jeremy Corbyn, right? Because Watson, although it started off with Watson having a direct role, very quickly they were trying to oust him and doing all of these kind of plots against him. Well, we already had all of the rumour mill and stuff against her before she even won the contest. But it's chaos. And you look at the Caerphilly thing. We've just talked about Caerphilly, and obviously you did it in your episode last time, and we've touched on it now. But Labour got 11% in this election. 11%. And they've held this seat since it existed, right? They've held the town since there was a Labour Party, and they got 11%. I mean, this we can talk. We've been talking up the extinction level events happening to the Tories, and they got, what was it, 2% or something, right? I mean, come on. But Labour collapsing down to 11. There's been a load of talk about just how perilous Starmer's position now is, and electing not Phillipson as deputy, and with the budget coming up in a couple of weeks, I think we're going to be having fun on this show over the next few episodes. Let's put it that way.
100%. I mean, you've now got MPs certainly briefing the media, unnamed MPs, of course, as they are right now. But they're at that stage. They're at that stage of it. You know, we saw this with Boris Johnson, right? Starts with unnamed MPs, then named MPs start coming forward,
Yeah.
then ministers start resigning, and then the whole thing comes crashing down. It can take time, but it feels like this will go a lot quicker, or it will speed up, because I don't see any good news stories coming. You've just mentioned the budget is coming in a month's time. There is no way, and I think we should definitely do an episode on, what could they do in the budget, which they probably won't, but what do we think they should do, which might actually
Yes.
turn the tide a little bit. But they're not going to do those things, and whatever they do is going to hurt people, and it's definitely going to hurt them. The council elections are in May. Assuming we get that far, they are facing total wipeout in the council elections that they're defending there, as are the Tories. And the other one, of course, is the Senate elections in May as well. And a little fact that
And
I was
Hollywood.
and Hollywood as well, a place close to your heart, Ian, right?
Mm.
But the Senate one was interesting because something I didn't know about is they're changing to a proportional system in
Yep.
2026, which I'd completely passed me by. Someone who fights for proportional representation, I probably should have known about this. And the threshold for below which, if you're below this threshold, you get nothing in this system, is 11%. So Labour, if that Caerphilly result was, ended up being replicated across the entire of Wales,
Yeah.
they could end up winning not one single
Well,
seat.
which is we mentioned on the on a previous show about the Canadian Conservatives going from government in Canada to 2 seats. It would be that kind of utter wipeout,
Yeah.
and it's entirely possible. As you say, it's very possible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the world we live in now. I think for Labour and for Keir Starmer, and this is why I mentioned Endgame. I've stolen it from left-wing firebrand Owen Jones, because he was talking about it today, that we have now, because of this perfect storm of Caerphilly, Keir Starmer's just unbelievably low ratings personally, the budget coming up, Lucy Powell being elected, which is going to hurt him. I mean, she's already come out firing in terms of her criticisms of Number 10 and the way they're doing things. The council elections and the Senate and Hollywood elections in May next year. There's literally no opportunity for a good news story for him at all. I think it's not a question now of if, but when, with Sir Keir.
We've been talking a lot about the local elections and Starmer being there to the local elections. And look, there's some realities of this. It's really difficult to remove a Labour Party leader, as Labour MPs found out with Jeremy Corbyn, where almost all of them wanted shut of the man, and because the membership elect the leader, and with a far more direct role than you have in the Conservatives, they couldn't get rid of him, even though practically all of the MPs wanted Corbyn gone. So the notion that Starmer is going to be gone before the May local elections, I mean, never mind after them, but even before, as now the likes of Owen Jones are suggesting, you just think, that's impossible, surely. But hang on. In today's politics, everything is possible, and things that are impossible are just the things that haven't happened yet. So let's just touch briefly on the Keir Starmer endgame thing that you brought up. And all I can say is that I can't think of any government this early into a term, and I know we've been talking about this for the last few months, that's in such a catastrophic position, right? They are crashing and burning quicker than I thought was possible, and I can't see anything coming up that's going to save them. No. I'm going to save him at least anyway. So I don't know how they do it, but you just get to the point of thinking they're going to have to get rid of him, because the alternative is Zombieland, where, as Tony Blair once put it about John Major, in office but not in power.
Yeah. Exactly, and I think the lessons from history here are, I mean, first of all, people may want Keir Starmer to go, but it's all about whether he wants to go, right? And if he doesn't want to go, then, as you say, it's very hard to get rid of him. If we think about Boris, it was the ultimate... Sorry? Well, yeah, just, I mean, pretend you're Nadine Dorris for a second. It took the entire cabinet and half of his government resigning, literally one after the other going in and resigning. What was it, like 48
Yep.
ministers and junior ministers and aides and everything resigned on one day. And that was the point. And it still had to be him resigning. He couldn't, they couldn't fire him. He had to resign. And I don't, and maybe I'm being unfair or being too nice to Keir Starmer. I would like to think that he's the kind of person who, if he saw the writing on the wall, it won't take 48. But if he sees the writing on the wall, a number of ministers start resigning and openly calling for him to go. What is it? Was it Thatcher who described them as the men in grey suits that turn up?
Yes.
The men in grey suits turn up at Downing Street and they'll be like, come on.
Well,
it's time to go.
You just said about Boris and that. It was. I remember following it on the day because I think he was sat in front of the liaison committee where the chair of all the select committees are all asking him questions, and he sat there and it's like another minister's gone, another one's gone, another one's gone, and it was like inevitable. But Jeremy Corbyn had the exact same thing with the shadow ministers. They all resigned one after another, and it just became an absolute collapse. He's then trying to appoint anyone who's left into shadow ministerial positions, and there weren't enough bodies to fill all of the seats, right? All of the available roles. So even with all of that going on, you still couldn't oust Corbyn from the Labour leadership, and that was when they were in opposition. When they're in government, it's even harder. So it's practically impossible. But at the same time, right, if the budget comes up and we're in a position where they're going to put a load of tax increases through, and there's now speculation about what those are going to be. And you're absolutely right. Before the budget, we will do a show where we'll say what our budget should be, and then we'll see what they actually do. But some of the suggestions that are being put up are so massively unpalatable for the Labour MPs that they're already saying, and besides which, a lot of these things, again, in practice, don't sound workable. Some of these things like, we're going to put they're now talking about your mansion tax, and they're talking about your squeezing some of the bands. And a lot of these things we already know do not raise the money that they think they're going to do. So they do a budget. It isn't, you've then got a budget debate and it gets amended. When the government is having its own budget amended, as I think it was Rishi Sunak's one, it was Liz Truss, wasn't it? Because she put the mini budget through and there was all these amendments going through, and that was the end, right? I can see amendments going through that have got a lot of support off the backbenches, and probably with the deputy leader of the Labour Party cheering them on. Right? It just becomes chaos, and you get to the point where it doesn't matter how difficult it is to get rid of him. Keeping him in is even harder.
And this is where it does come down to appealing to his better sense of what's right for the party, right? Right for the party, right for the country, and everything else. Boris Johnson was an extreme example because he was going to cling on, and if he could have found a way to cling on, even having lost 40 odd of his ministers, he would have. And I don't know where Keir Starmer is on that, because again, the power of being Prime Minister, the prestige of being Prime Minister, I mean, look, we've never been it. I'm sure it is quite impressive, to be in that role, and the not wanting to give it up, particularly so early into your tenure, is understandable. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's going to be. I feel that we may not get as far as the local elections before there's some kind of challenge. I think it will be a challenge that crashes and burns, because it's almost that kind of, the Heseltine thing, right? It's like someone who puts their name forward just to try and test the water.
What you're saying is that we're going to have a 2026 version of James Purnell resigning. James Purnell. We're going way, way, way back into the depths of time, but James Purnell was a Secretary of State for something in Brown's government, and he quit, supposedly, as the first person to then have everybody else resign to oust Gordon Brown, and nobody else quit, so he just looked like an absolute bird.
Yeah. The dominoes did not fall.
No, they wobbled a little bit, but then didn't actually go. Honestly, I just almost think the problem with Starmer and the problem with his government now is, what is the point of them? What are they actually trying to do, other than going from crisis to crisis to crisis? Because there doesn't seem to be any kind of a plan, not even a coherent plan, but not any plan. The budget, they're now saying, well, Never mind raise money to do the things that we want to do. We've got to raise a whole load of money just to basically fill the enormous hole that's opened up since we got here last. So there isn't a program for government. There isn't a direction of travel. It's just become self-serving chaos.
Yeah, and look, even if we're being nice and saying that they do want to fix the country and that they do believe that if they make iterative changes, it will improve people's lives and everything else. Even if that is true, it's all too small fry, right? I mean, that's the problem. It's like, so when Rachel Reeves was out the other day, obviously we're in that period now where we're going to get probably a month of drip fed news stories coming from the Treasury and coming from Number 11 about what Rachel Reeves is thinking about doing. And she's saying things like the broadest shoulders should share the burden. So she's testing the water on taxing the rich, but it won't be enough, right? It's like what it needs to be, because again, when you've got the Greens coming out and talking about wealth taxes and talking about it every single day about doing proper wealth taxes and taxing of assets of the super rich, that is getting more attention.
We've got one of land value tax, right? Tax the value of assets, right? Rather than things that can't, as you always point out, things that can't be moved. And Polanski says the same thing: tax the things that are actually here, rather than the things that are in a bank account that could be anywhere.
Yeah, but you can't. Exactly, you can't take Belgravia Square and move it somewhere else, right? It is all those lovely buildings are owned by people, very rich people. Tax it. It's it's not hard, but it is for the Labour government because they're like the Tories before them. They'll always be the last to the party because they'll realise that they need to do something, but by the time they've realised that they need to do it, it's too late. And the thing they come up with will be watered down because they don't have the guts to actually do the big thing that the other parties have already talked about.
We're also in this bizarre place where what's needed is that we invest our way out of this hole, right? We've actually got to get money circulating again. Look, I was in Manchester on my trip, and part of the lesson of Manchester is when you invest in a place, in housing, in infrastructure, then people come and they live there and they work there and they spend money there, and it then provides shops and restaurants and cafes and new tech environments and all the rest of it. Manchester is this absolute roaring success story, and it all started with we have got to get people back here, and that means investing, right? So don't take a broken city centre as Manchester had in the 90s with 500 people living in it and say, oh, we can't afford to do anything with that, why wouldn't we want to? You throw money at it so that it heals itself. Our economy is in the same state as Manchester was when I used to walk through it in the early 90s, going from Piccadilly to Victoria train station to go home, and you go through on a Saturday night and it was horrible because no one lives there, and it was just right. So you've got to actually go out there and do these things, and they don't seem to have learned the lesson. I don't know if you saw this, and it's only a little story and it's not been given a huge amount of coverage, but one of the things that's just been very recently announced is High Speed 2, the rail link thing, right? That's very controversial. It has cost like £4 gazillion or something, and it's still rising. So at the moment, it's going from Birmingham Curzon Street, which is the new station there, to Old Oak Common, which is going to be a new stop on the Elizabeth line. Linking to London Euston, there isn't the money for, and they're saying the private sector will pay for it, but so far the private sector isn't, and nothing's happening. At the northern end, all of the different arms and legs and things that were supposed to go off have all mostly been cancelled, but the one bit that was still going ahead was what's called a Handsacre link, where it was going to go from the Birmingham Airport Delta Junction thing where everything was going and connect onto the West Coast Railway line towards Manchester, Liverpool and the north. That bit has been postponed by another 3-4 years. Okay, they're not even going to make a start on it now. They're just pushing it further and further back. So what we are going to end up with is we're going to have spent more than the budget for the entire network on a thing that goes from not the station in Birmingham that everybody's at to the outskirts of London. Right? It will be of no use to anybody that will have spent all of this money, and because, we can't afford that, they're not going to plumb it in to do the useful things that's needed. And it won't even have done the job that it was built for, because unless it's going to connect up to it, then it doesn't take any of the pressure off the existing overcrowded railway line. It's just stupid. It's one of these things where they're saying, well, we can't afford it. Well, we can't afford not to do it. And there's a whole list. When we do our budget show, and make sure you've subscribed, because you'll get me and Nige coming up with a list and rather than just ranting, but there's a whole load of things that they could be doing now and saying, we're going to invest in the future, right?
Yeah.
And what was the one-word slogan? Change? What bloody change? Right? This is the exact nonsense that we've had for a long, long time, regardless of party and regardless of who's the Prime Minister, of nothing happening in this country.
Yeah.
Right?
Continuation.
And it's still nothing happening.
Yeah, a continuation of the managed decline that we've seen for years, and it's just getting worse. But look, I mean, we will definitely do that budget show. We'll do it soon. I think what people will get from watching this is, look, we don't think that Keir Starmer is going to last, but if he does, then it's curtains for the Labour Party. It really is, because I don't see how he leads them into a general election. They've got to do something. But it's great news for Plaid Cymru. It's great news for the Greens at the moment. It's pretty good news for the Lib Dems right now. It's like my Facebook feed is full right now.
Full of Lib Dems.
Of Lib Dem winning here by election results. I might need to change my filters because that's all I ever see at the moment. But yeah, it's going well. It's going well.
The peak Farage thing that we talked about. I'm not saying they're finished. I'm not saying they're going to go away. I'm just saying that some of the air is coming out of the balloon a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the one party that we haven't mentioned at all is the Conservatives, and the only people at the moment who are talking up the return of the Conservatives are the Conservatives. Everybody else is saying, no, you've gone. You're done, you're finished, don't worry about it. And you look at all of the results in these things. Apart from there was one council seat that the Tories held. In all of the rest of it, they are absolutely nowhere. So that people need things to be changed in this country. We do need change, and people are going out there and they're looking for different places to vote. But what they're not going to be doing is going back to the Tories, and that is the bit that of all of the noise that's out there in politics at the moment. We can talk up stuff about most of the parties, with the exception of the Conservatives, who really do seem to have kind of disappeared. But look at the Caerphilly thing again. Although they were down on 2%, Labour on 11% in a seat that they'd held for an eternity. I think, as you said in the last one, are we now at the point where it's Labour and the Tories who are both in the same terminal death spiral?
Yeah, and they're ultimately they're both going to be replaced by who knows? We're talking about obviously the Greens and Reform a lot. The Lib Dems are still there, not getting any airtime as always, but they're sitting on.
But we are winning seats.
They're sitting on a lot of parliamentary seats, and they're sitting on a lot of council seats, and they're probably going to have a very good local election in a few months' time. So the opportunity for the third parties, if we call them all third parties right now, is huge to become the number one and number two. It really is. That's the all bets are off right now, and the opportunity is there. Excellent. Anything else, Ian, before we bring it to a close?
It's been quite a long one, so I'll probably shut up at this point.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all content, as they say. Awesome. Well, look, as Ian's already said, like, subscribe, come talk to us. I was chatting to a lovely person today about how Plaid Cymru are communist and all this kind of stuff. It was a good, fun debate. We're open to debate. Debating is good. Tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah, and genuinely tell us why we're wrong. We're not claiming to be the know-alls who have got the instant fix, right? If we did have, we wouldn't be sat here talking to you on this. We'd be on the telly, right, because we'd already been elected into office or something. So we don't know everything, but we do know the things that are broken, and there seems to be an awful lot of people out there who are in this almost parallel reality, right? If the only source of news you've got is GB News, watch a different channel, or talk TV with the guy who managed to sack himself with my Facebook got hacked. Right?
Oh, that old one. Fine. That old one.
If all you're doing is watching Talk TV or whatever it's called in GB News, then try and watch something else. If all you're getting on News is X, try and have a look somewhere else. I'm not saying that other sources are necessarily right, but they're a different perspective. And the problem is, people are at the point now where the only perspective they're getting is their perspective. And then, as we had with the Caerphilly thing, they think that that must be the case and everybody thinks that way. And then, hang on, how has that happened? So we don't know. Come in comments and tell us why we're wrong. But don't just say, I'm voting reform. Tell us why. Tell us why you're voting reform.
100%, my friend. It's lovely to have you back. It genuinely is. Let's do it all again soon, and we'll watch out, everyone, for our budget show. I need to come up with lots of great ideas, like free whiskey for me. That would be my budget, but we'll come up with some proper ideas. I promise.
Absolutely.
And on that note, thank you, Ian, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.